A deadly bombing at the finish line of the Boston Marathon was the news story that consumed the national headlines this week. While there are many places you can hear about that news story, the tragedy had a swift ripple effect here, most immediately with the decision by the president to cancel a high-profile visit planned for today to the University of Kansas. Most of the media, including the reporters around this table, was set to be in Lawrence right now to cover President Obama at KU. But we never got the full story, though, on why the president was slated to come here in the first place. Are we any the wiser, Dave?
No. There were suggestions. We were told that he was going to talk a little bit about immigration reform, which, as you know, was going to be the topic of the week. There was going to be a new immigration proposal submitted. One of the things that's true in Kansas is the state does make available in-state tuition for the children of immigrants here illegally or who were brought here illegally. So there was some suggestion that would be discussed, but the specific topic, at least as far as we know, was not ever officially released.
Rare for a President Obama to actually come to Kansas to begin with, Stacey.
Right, and it would have been a second visit in just a short period of time. Remember, giving that essentially campaign speech that launched his re-election. We do know that the White House had asked for facilities that would accommodate somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 people. So I think immigration is clearly one of the topics that could have been touched on. Perhaps even Medicare reform, seeing how Kansas hasn't necessarily gotten on the rolls for the rollout of Obamacare as it starts to move. So that's another possibility. And surprisingly, though, the governor, Brownback, said he would have met with the president if invited. He hadn't had an invitation yet, but was willing to meet and attend if asked.
That was one of the ripple effects of what happened in Boston this week. Were there any others here in Kansas City, Bill?
There were. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday at the Nova call-in rehearsal, I had a chance to talk with Police Chief Darrell Forte, and that afternoon he left a little bit early because he had convened a special meeting of his commanders to talk about Kansas City's plans on a major incident, our response plan, and it was specifically because of the Boston incident. Also, we checked with a counterterrorism expert here in town, Colonel Bob Lewis, who his take on it was, you may notice at sporting events, public events in the next few months a change. You may not. A lot of this is going to fly under the radar, but clearly it did put it very, very high in the stream of consciousness.
The trolley run this weekend, no bags or backpacks allowed for the trolley run this weekend. So obviously having an impact already.
Right, and I think that was to be expected. We know now that it was bags dropped at the Boston Marathon, and having run in a lot of these events, 5Ks and 10Ks, it's not unnecessary to see people carrying their bags and leave them at the finish line or have a friend carrying them for there. So I think these are needed changes, and I think it will probably see some beefed up security at that run as well.